I'm a god.
Well, what if there is no tomorrow?
I'm a god.
There wasn't one today.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of It's Time to Rewind, a podcast stuck in its own time loop right along with the movies we discuss. This season, we're taking a look at Groundhog Day, after day, after day, after day. I'm your host, Bubba Wheat from Flights, Tights, and Movie Nights, and in this episode, we're discussing Phil's 8th Groundhog Day that starts at 46 minutes and 38 seconds, with Phil ordering sweet vermouth, rocks with a twist, which just so happens to be Rita's favorite drink, and ends at 46 minutes and 38 seconds, with Phil discovering what sweet vermouth on the rocks actually tastes like. Today my guest is Sean, host of Next Scene Podcast. How are you doing today?
Well, I guess the question we have to ask ourselves is, does Phil feel lucky? Oh, sorry, that was yesterday. That was last episode. That was the last loop. No, I'm great. Thank you so much for having me back. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you back. And, you know, before we get to today's loop, I am kind of curious, what, other than Groundhog Day, obviously, what is your experience with time loop movies in general?
This is the one. I've seen a few others, and there's been some good ones. You know, but I always come back to the old Groundhog. Recently, Palm Springs was one that was really good. I was surprised. Is it Andy Samberg? Is that the actor's name?
Yes, I think that's him. I don't know too much about it other than, you know, I know that it's a recent movie and it's a time loop movie, but, you know, I've been saving me digging into other time loop movies for future seasons of this podcast. So I'm kind of keeping myself fresh. So
okay.
It's interesting to hear other people's, you know, what they've seen, which kind of helps me know what direction I want to go for future seasons of this.
Sure. Yeah, I was surprised because I'm not a fan of Andy Samberg at all, but I'd heard so many good things about that film that I finally broke down and watched it, and it was very enjoyable, very good. Happy Death Day was another one, sort of another different take on the loop that kind of builds on this. I kind of think I think Groundhog Day is kind of the first one of the genre with the loops. I know that there were some TV episodes, and particularly Star Trek: The Next Generation had a time loop episode that I think was before the film came out. But you know, in terms of films, this is kind of first. This was the best. There's some other good ones, but again, you can't beat the original.
Yeah, there were a couple other movies from Japan that were before this, but this is the first real big popular American time loop movie, and I think it's still the gold standard, which is of course is why I picked it for the first season of this podcast.
Yeah, good place to start.
This is a shorter day, and I think it's interesting that Phil's questions are presented in exactly the same way. I feel like it's almost like he wants to make sure that he gets exactly the same response, where, you know, he might get a slightly different response if maybe his wording or his tone is a little bit different from day to day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, because one of the things is, you know, he's rehearsing, he's gathering information, he's preparing to, you know, these scenarios in these repeated days, but he can't write anything down, or he can write it down, but then it would disappear when, you know, when the day restarts. So he's got to do all this by memory. So if he's building a script one line at a time, he's playing that game where you say one line and someone else says something else, and you build the story that way. Although even if he's kind of doing it with himself, so and he's trying. He's surprisingly scientific about it for someone who is, well, I guess maybe he is science. Yeah, I kind of my first thought is he's like a performer. He's a TV personality, but you know, he may not be a weatherman. He may be, well, not just a weatherman. He may be a meteorologist. So he may have a background in science and kind of have that approach of an experiment where you keep everything constant and you have one variable. You change one thing, and that way, if the results change, it was the one thing that you changed. So he's, being scientific of like, okay, I'm going to do and say the same thing and then make one change and see, okay, is the outcome better or worse than it was last time? And if it's better, then I'm going to keep that. And then he'll add another line at the end. So it makes sense that he kind of keeps it very regular, that kind of keeps to the script or the experiment, the way he's built it in his head.
Yeah, I think in programming, that's kind of referred to as like a brute force algorithm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Where he's just, using basically brute force to try every different iteration. And then whenever something is right, then he moves to the next section and tries that in every different iteration, which Rita is still very put off by Phil, and she asks him a very pointed question with the toast, where she has one specific answer. But this is the second time around. It really makes me wonder if, she, for whatever reason, didn't ask for the toast in the previous day because he didn't order the same drink as her, or if Phil's just treating it, really like a game or like a brute force algorithm, and then once he feels like he failed in the date, that he just like gets up and walks out and then goes and does some other sort of planning to do for later in the date.
Yeah, because that's another thing we don't see. We can speculate what happens when it all falls apart. Yeah, when the particular scene or the scenario that he's working on, this particular experiment, when it blows up. So like when he says, so this round, when she says, or he says, as a toast to the groundhog, and she says, I always drink to world peace. Does he just put his drink, he just puts his drink down and he turns around and he walks right out of the bar. It's like, all right, it's like, okay, that experiment failed and I'm done. And he goes back, and maybe he finds, someone in the lobby he can chat up or something. Like, does he just kind of abandon it at that point, or does he kind of stick with it to see, and maybe he can be a little bit more free to be like, okay, this didn't go perfect, kind of quote unquote, doing the finger quotes, which really doesn't work on a podcast. But like, so I don't like the way this is going. I'm going to change it, but let me kind of play around. And then we pick up, the next loop, which we can talk about, which, kind of cover the next episode, but, kind of pick up the next loop. And he says he gets, he kind of gets one line further. So first there's the order of the drink, then there's the toast, and then there's, you can kind of build it up one line at a time. Already Rita's kind of switching it up. Rita's acting a little bit different because, she didn't, or we didn't see a toast. We didn't get that far. Maybe we didn't stick with it long enough. But we didn't see her asking, what shall we drink to?
And I also think, we don't get a whole lot this minute, but we do get some wonderful eye acting, both from Rita and from Phil. They really, in just a few seconds, they both just take us on a journey. And although I don't really know what journey Rita is taking with her eyes, because she's kind of looking all over the place. And especially with Phil's right after it, it almost makes me think, is this the first time she's actually drinking sweet vermouth on the rocks with a twist? Because she has a little bit of a similar reaction, but where she's just like, what is this? What's going on?
She gives a look, and it could be in reaction to what Phil's just said, although like that's normal. Like you're in Punxsutawney, PA. It's Groundhog Day. You say, you've just ordered drinks. You say, what shall we drink to? To that seems like a natural thing. Oh, let's drink to the groundhog. And she's kind of rolling her eyes, not a strict eye roll, but she is giving a look. I hadn't considered that she's actually reacting to the drink, similar to the way Phil does.
which Phil's reaction is just amazing.
Yeah. The great Bill Murray who's given us face all day. Have you ever had sweet vermouth on the rocks with a twist?
I have not. I'm not a huge drinker.
Mm-hmm.
So I had considered trying it, but at the same time, I would imagine that, a bottle of vermouth is not, like, I can't just go out and buy, like, a couple bottles, or go, like, get one of the mini bar.
Nip, the $1 nips.
So I wasn't really interested in buying, like, a $15 to $20 bottle of vermouth just just for this podcast that I'm putting out for free and I'm not making any money on.
So you're smart, because I did for my podcast. I went out and I'm like, we get to this part of the film, and I went out and I didn't even think of asking or looking to see if they had any of the $1 little nip bottles. Actually, I probably could have just gone to a bar and ordered the one drink and spent $5 and at least have it professionally prepared, which didn't occur to me at the time. I went out and I spent the $15 to $20 and bought a bottle of sweet vermouth, and it's not good. And I don't know. And I'm not a huge drinker as well, and I don't know a lot, so I don't know if it's supposed to taste like that. Although, given Bill Murray, given Phil Connor's reaction, at first I thought, like, did I buy the wrong thing? I mean, the bottle says sweet vermouth, but maybe there's different kinds. It's very sweet, and it is very syrupy, and it is the kind of thing that I can imagine it being a good mixer. That if certainly if you're a bartender working at a bar, you want it. If you do a lot of mixed drinks and you entertain a lot, it seems like something you would have on hand. But it didn't strike me as something that was ever meant to be, to drink straight. And I think my research, I think the traditional twist with sweet vermouth was lime, but although we don't know exactly what, I don't know if we get a good enough look to see what twist Rita has. But yeah, so I filled up a tall glass with ice and sweet vermouth and a slice of lime, and it's just alcohol. It's like sugar water, like syrupy sugar water with alcohol. I don't know. It's like if you took a glass of vodka and you just poured a cup of sugar and stirred it up. And Phil Connor's reaction, I think that was probably that's probably what the same reaction I had when I tried it. And yeah, I could see if maybe Rita's not a big drinker and she's thinking, well, I'm in a bar, it's a holiday, it's a special occasion, why not? And I don't know, maybe she heard about it in an old film or something. And maybe that's the look that she's giving, for the same reason that Phil's giving his look, is that, this is not a good drink. And apparently they chose it. I guess it's Harold Ramis's wife's favorite drink. Like, this is an actual drink that people in the real world order. Listener, write in or call in or, send your emails, whatever. If this is your favorite drink and you want to defend the sweet vermouth with a twist, please go ahead. But maybe it's an acquired taste. Maybe if Phil came back to this bar, a couple hundred times, a couple hundred loops in a row, eventually he'd get used to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure there's people that like just the real syrupy sweet drinks.
Yeah.
And that they're the same people that get the extreme sugar coffee drinks at Starbucks.
Yeah, I guess.
Like the unicorn, whatever that one was.
Yeah, I mean, I could do like a daiquiri. So certainly there are sweet alcoholic drinks that I'll drink, but not like this. And this is, you need the character of Phil. Like, it's so hard because he's a jerk and he's really unlikable at times, but we have to be on his side and we kind of have to root for him to pull through at the end to really get into and enjoy the film. And I think Bill Murray fits that exactly. Like, if you've read interviews, you talk to people that have met Bill Murray or worked with Bill Murray, like half of them, actually more than half say he's a complete jerk, and more than half say he's the wonderful guy and he's the best in the world. Like there's an overlap of people that say both, that he's a great guy and, he's just a jerk, but he's Bill Murray and you go with it because, he just has that, that thing about him. And that makes him so good for this character. And you talked about the eyes and the facial acting, and kind of gives, he gives Rita a look first when she's, that whole like, drink to world peace. And he's like, all right, yeah, world peace. And then he takes the sip, and we get the reaction to the drink. And then Rita looks at him, and he's got to put on a happy face, like, oh, yum, I enjoy this. I mean, just this loop, this day is very short, but like in the span of like 10, 15 seconds, we get half a dozen different looks and expressions from Bill Murray that just, that's why this guy can do this and make us like and care about this character.
Yeah.
So great.
Yeah, he's just, stuff like this. You just see why he's so phenomenal as an actor and so popular and beloved by the most audiences, at least. Mm-hmm. But that's all I got for this day. Did you have anything else before we wrap up today?
Well, I just want to point out the toast that he does, his little line, line about the drink, like, it makes me think of Rome, the way the sun hits the buildings in the afternoon. Like, that doesn't, like, do you think he's ever been to Rome? Like, because he isn't really saying, like, the way. What way? He's just saying the way the sun hit the buildings. And it's kind of like, it's something he probably workshopped. He probably tried that line a couple times before it reaches this kind of final form. But he's kind of, it sounds good, but he's not really saying anything.
Yeah, I think that's 100% just the line, especially where Phil's character is at this point. I don't think he's ever been to Rome. I mean, he's been to the Virgin Islands, maybe he's been to a nude beach in Italy, but he's never been to Rome to go to Rome. Yeah.
Well, because what this makes me think of is, you're sitting at an outdoor cafe and you're sipping your drink and you're people watching, you're watching the crowds go by and you see the sun slowly cross the sky and the shadows move across the building. And like, I don't see Phil as that kind of guy. I see Phil as, I feel like he's got a plan the way he plans out these days. Like if Phil ever went to Rome on vacation, he'd be like, all right, here's a half a dozen museums. Here's all these statues. Here's all these things we got to do. He seems a little bit too tense to me. I don't see him as a guy who just sat and watched the shadows cross the buildings, in the way he's kind of wistfully referring to here. So I think this is 100% just a line. There's no basis in reality. He's never been to Rome. He's never seen sun hitting buildings.
Yeah, this is just one of the things that he thinks Rita wants to hear at this point. And it doesn't really get a reaction one way or the other. So he sticks with it.
Yeah. Well, and also we'll see about, something that I don't think he knows about Rita yet, but he will discover soon that maybe would have changed his choice of cities. Maybe he might have said, I don't know, Paris instead of Rome. We'll see.
Yeah, that's, I'd like to thank you for coming back again today. And why don't you go ahead and remind everybody where they can find you online?
Sure, yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me back. And yeah, a listener, if you want to hear more of me talking, it's a little bit of a different film. I covered the movie Spinal Tap, or This is Spinal Tap, 1 minute at a time. I had a great co-host, Heidi Bennett, who worked with me on that. This was actually my first podcast and my first movie covering a movie 1 minute at a time. You can find that at Spinal Tap Minute. And that's at spinaltapminute.com. And if you just search Spinal Tap Minute in Apple Music or your Apple Podcasts or wherever you find your podcast, look for Spinal Tap Minute, and you can hear me there. So thank you.
And as always, I'm Bubba Wheat from Flights, Tights, and MovieNights.com, and where I have written reviews of over 500 superhero and comic book movies. You can find this podcast, It's Time to Rewind, on Anchor.fm, as well as anywhere else that you can find podcasts. And, that's all for today. I'm off to go order a sweet vermouth with a twist at a local bar that I'm sure is fully open now.
I'm a god. Well, what if there is no tomorrow? I'm a god. There wasn't one today. It always makes me think of Rome. The way the sun hits the buildings in the afternoon.